let's kick off with Meghan, how to prioritize self-care in your life and what that looks like for you. Because I think, being in the Air Force and kind of going to the Air Force Academy, physical fitness was like a big part of the gig automatically. But so how do you manage that and separate that for what you have to do for your job versus just your overall self-care, if that makes sense?
That's a great question. So first, I want to caveat by saying I feel like I'm on the beginning of this journey of like the whole feel thing, the whole self-care, setting boundaries, like very, very early on, like coming out of the infant stages into, an adolescent kind of teenager stage. With that being said, though, like I'm excited where I'm at because it gives me like the room to grow and to really have so much to be able to capture and learn as I go along. Yeah. In terms of like self-care, though, one thing I've really been thinking about is like, if you're really honest with yourself, what actually fills you up? Because a lot of us turn to like for me, it's, I'm going to go through YouTube for what ends up being a couple hours, or I'm going to binge watch this TV show. And then you get done doing that and it doesn't actually fill you up. Yeah. And so that's kind of the thing that's been on the forefront of my mind with self-care is like what actually like kind of really nourishes you at the end of the day and what makes you feel. So physical fitness obviously is a huge part of the military. And so I kind of always just include that across the board, peanut butter spread that across my week, however I can. Yeah. Because that's just a no-brainer for the job that we're in. But for me, it's really trying to find ways that are just quiet and actually will nourish me after a long, stressful day of work. So my husband and I work in a very similar work environment. We actually like work really closely together, which has its pros and cons.
Sure.
So when we come home, we've been trying to do like a walk and decompress from our day because there's a lot to talk about, especially when you can like really easily relate to one another's work day. Sure. I know the people that he's talking about. I know the processes he's talking about. So going for walks has been a really big one for us. And that's just to kind of get it all out and then move on during the evening. Yeah. Another kind of practice that goes along with my faith, which is super foundational in my life, is something called like the daily office hour. I read about it in a book recently, and it was practiced originally in the monasteries by the monks. And they would have like they would just pause throughout the day, and a lot of other religions do similar like concepts. But the idea is that you're not doing like your devotional in the morning and checking your box, but you're kind of spreading it out throughout your day. Because what I would find is I would do my devotional, check the box, go about my day, and completely like disregard what God was doing throughout the day. Yeah. So trying to make time at like lunch, even if it's 5 to 10 minutes of like a meditation or just silence or reading a prayer or something. And then spreading that out into the evening. And you can mix it up. You can do whatever you want. There's no right way to do it. But those are just a couple of really practical things that I've been trying to do more recently. And I've found actually help with the self-care piece.
Well, and I love how you talk about there's no wrong way to do it, because I think that's so key in self-care is we have to kind of release these ideas of what is and isn't self-care. Because what's self-care for you may not be self-care for me and vice versa. And that's okay. Find that thing that fits for you. And also that whole check the box. I mean, I stressed myself out and guilted myself so badly when I was raising my kids and I was younger. Like, I didn't get my quiet time in this morning. God's not going to hear anything I have to say today. And that's just not true. I mean, that's just not true. And so what I started doing is I adopted a practice of literally prayed in my car on the way to work because that's when I had time. That's when it was quiet.
Absolutely.
There wasn't anybody in my ear that wanted anything. Yes. And I just had a conversation. It wasn't this, kneeling by my bed and, it wasn't this, it was just, and it worked for me and it made me feel connected and it felt relational. So I love that you speak to that and just finding those things. And also that you spoke to about, you and Seth both being in the Air Force and kind of that could be challenging, but also how you can support each other in that and have you found that space for that. I think that's really, really cool. Confidently setting boundaries. So also within that, since you do work together, at what point do you like, all right, we're not talking about work anymore today. We are moving into a different mode.
Yep. That is a big one for us that we both we're always trying to get better at.
Yeah.
But we kind of do allow ourselves the initial kind of decompression. I need to share what happened in my day.
Absolutely.
So on and so forth. And then it usually one or the other person, we're both pretty decent about doing it. We'll say, all right, we're done. I mean, we need to just move on to our evening activities and what we have going on here. And that's a huge boundary we have to put up because both of us are managing things at work that are like 24/7 operations. So you're getting calls at different times in the day.
Wow.
You're getting calls on the weekends and on holidays. And so you have to, allow yourself to do that in a healthy way.
Yeah.
But then, it's time to move on because it's probably going to come back up later in the evening when you get a phone call or something like that. So the sooner you can do that, the better. But that's a huge one that we have to do.
Yeah, that's a tricky one too, because you don't get to decide whether you're 9 to 5, 8 to 6, 10 to 4, whatever. That's not part of the gig. And so you kind of have to know that going in, which I think is super important that, okay, we got to somehow, how are we going to navigate this? Also too, you all got married. You graduated the academy, you got married and you headed off on 10-day span of time. So then within that, and you're in Hawaii. So the boundaries too, that as a couple that you may have had to set, or, you've got great families. You guys are so fortunate that both of you come from great supportive families. But even within that as a couple, y'all can't come to Hawaii all the time. I know it's great, but we need to space ourselves too. How have you navigated that just as a married couple?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's something we have struggled with more and had to really kind of take a step back and reevaluate for ourselves because we've had a lot of visitors come visit us, which has been awesome. It's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
But there's also when a visitor comes, you want to give them your best. You want to be there when they're here. You don't want to be the hardest part is being pulled in different directions. We're both doing our masters, so we have school. We're both working. We're both involved in our church. And so the hardest part is just balancing all of that. So when that happens, you have to be a little creative with your time in terms of, sometimes we'll take a step away for a week from the church activities, or we'll try to plan these trips around times when school is not going to be too busy, or when we have the opportunity to take a couple of days off from work. But one thing with that I always tell people who are a few years behind me, I say, I think the best thing you could do is live away from home for an extended period of time. And it's not to say that you have to do that forever, but I think there's just so much value in creating those boundaries right from the start, learning more about yourself. And especially for us as a young married couple, that helped in a lot of ways because we had the time to just be us and to establish our relationship. And COVID helped with that too, because
people couldn't come.
We spent 2 years with just each other, and we kind of built that foundation, but it was so valuable. And now we feel very comfortable and confident in our relationship. And it's a good stepping stone to whatever God has for us next. But I think that's always a really good thing for people to try, at least for a little while.
Yeah.
And then one thing that I've been thinking a lot about, and this is probably more work related, is I don't owe people an explanation about why I'm doing things, or
I'm clapping right now. That's so good.
Or what? I don't really owe them anything. I mean, there are benefits to explaining things for communication purposes, and you have to find when that's appropriate and when that's not. But that goes along with the guilt that's just eats you alive. And it always seems to be getting in my way. And so I have to fight that every day and make space for what's important and say, no, this guilt doesn't have a place here today. That's a huge boundary I have to put up. That guilt always seems to be creeping in, but you really have to stand firm in that. So
I love that so much. I spent years, probably, and still I'm working my way out of it, until probably the last 2 years when I really started intentionally going on this journey of explaining myself to death, to the point that my daughters were like, Mom, You don't have to explain it. You don't have to validate it. It's fine. So the fact that you have a concept of that at 25, oh, that's going to serve you so well. And I think too, you know, all those things in place, sometimes it's harder to set boundaries with people that you really like and love than it is people like, I don't feel that bad about telling them not to come. They kind of annoy me. You guys don't have that scenario. So even in some ways, sometimes it's kind of, I'm like, it's, you know, harder. So I love that you've kind of found that. And it's kind of interesting how one, being in Hawaii, so far enough away that people have to plan. And two, COVID has had an effect on all of us in those different ways. I love that you recognize the value that has been for your marriage, though, in terms of that own space. Brady and I moved away for a couple of years right after we got married. Best thing we ever did. Best thing. Got out of everybody's shadows and we're just there with each other. And I that 100% so valuable. So valuable.
Absolutely.
Taking care of our emotional health as much as our physical health. What are some practices you use to process your emotions in healthy ways so they don't get stuck in your body through other avenues, you know, pain, anxiety, all those things that come up when we don't process our emotions fully?
Yeah. So one thing I've been practicing a lot is like naming emotions and being able to say, I feel this way because of this. And that helps a lot with the communication piece. I see that a lot more with my relationship with my husband, where it's like, he's like, why are you upset? Okay, well, I need to think about why I'm upset so he can, you know, either just be there or help and, you know, that way I'm not being just angry, mean, nasty person. But that's a huge one that I've been trying to identify. But on the flip side of that is being okay with not being okay. So you don't always have to have an answer, and you could just say, you know what, I just feel upset today. And that is how it's going to be. And like, I recently started going back to counseling, and my counselor was like, just be present in that moment where you're not okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Why can't you just stay in that place? You know, and obviously you don't want to dwell there forever, but that's, for me, it's always when you have those emotions, I call them negative emotions, although they're not negative. You know, when you feel sad or you feel angry or you feel anxious, you know, all of these emotions are part of who God has created us. And it's just a matter of what you do with them. But I always want to so quickly just jump to, okay, I need to not be angry. What's the quickest way I can get to not being angry? But that has actually created more problems than it has helped, because it's just trying to put a Band-Aid on something, whereas you got to dig a little bit to find that, why am I angry? And what do I need to do with this situation? Or do I just need to allow myself to feel that emotion all the way through? I think that's something my mom always says is, you know, ride all the way through. And so that's something I've been thinking a lot about. And then the third thing that is super big, especially in the military, is there's so many things outside of your control. Like the military has such a strong grip on your life, and they dictate everything that you do, and you've signed up for it. So it's, you know, not a surprise, but you have to kind of reframe situations in your head, or reframe like the scenario, because you have no control. There's nothing I can do about this situation. Yeah. The military is saying, hey, you're going to be gone from here to here. And I'm like, well, I don't want to be gone from there to there, but there's nothing I can do. So it's just, you know, it's just reframing, you know, why am I upset about this scenario? And what can I, you know, how can I change my mindset? Because there's nothing I could physically do. And I could choose to be upset about it, but it's going to eat me up inside, and I need to move forward. I need to give myself permission to move past it. And that's the only way I've been able to do that, by just taking a different perspective on things. Yeah.
Yeah. I love what you pointed out too about, I think that we have been brought up in a culture and environment that has told us what emotions are good and what emotions are bad. And so we feel like we got to race through those bad ones because we don't want to be negative or, you know, whatever. And we don't process them out. We don't fully feel them through. And then we get stuck. These things get stuck in our body and show up in other ways, when God gave us all these emotions. They're there to tell us things about ourselves, and they're there for us to sit in and think about and process why. You know, it's not like he didn't give us some and not others. All of them are from God. So what do we do with it? And it's what we do with them and ride them out and not being afraid to sin in it. We want to hurry out of it. And just, I think that's the greatest advice is just, it's okay to sin it. It's okay to feel it. And I don't need to feel bad about feeling bad. It's okay. And I don't have to explain that. Yeah, absolutely. And absolutely.
One thing I've talked to, I think my brother told me this, that someone gave him the advice that like, when you feel anxious, instead of thinking of it as a horrible thing, like think of it as God is giving you a nudge that something's not right with you.
Yeah.
You're kind of imbalanced and you need to, turn to him to kind of get that corrected and go about the action. So it's really kind of like a warning sign or a warning light going on in your head. So rather than being so scared of it, be appreciative of it and then move forward from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I really had to get past the point of feeling like my body was betraying me with all of these things rather than seeing them as a helper and there to support me and give me indicators that something needed to be done. But such good stuff. And so good that you're having those conversations. And I know your mom's talked about her journey with this. And I think, and I've done the same with my daughters. Like, get on these things. And that's why I'm doing this podcast. Get on these things now. Have these conversations. Don't be afraid of them. So important. I think this will be a really interesting question for you because especially in the military, you've got a different lens as a woman. How we can support ourselves and other women in living unapologetically?
So the first thing I would say with this is we've talked about it a little bit is like what works for you works for you. And I think we as a society have gotten a little bit better at that, where we now look a little bit more favorably upon like stay-at-home moms. Like, good for them. That is a hard job to have. And I don't envy what they do instead of looking down upon them. And so that's the thing with women across the board is some of us are going to choose different paths or different ways to do things. And that's what works for you. And despite what you choose, you're still going to have struggles. You're still going to have good times. You're still going to have things that stress you out every day. It doesn't matter whether you're a full-time worker, a part-time worker, you stay at home, that is a full-time job for sure. Or, you choose to go down a different route of maybe not even having kids or having a family. I mean, I think that's a good for me to kind of reframe my mindset when it comes to handling and interacting with other women around me, because we're all created differently and we're not intended to do the same thing. Or just because you choose to not do a career job doesn't mean you're any less than the next person.
Yeah, we all bring value and we all bring value in our own ways. And it's important to be champions of all those things because we were all we're made uniquely. Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you touched on too. I think I really, your mom and I still, even with as much as times were changing in the 80s, still grew up in an environment. There was an expectation that you would be a mom and that you would get married. And that's not for everybody. And that's okay. And I think especially in Christian circles, you're not any less godly or any less faithful if that is not your path, and I really talked a lot to my girls alike about you decide what you want to do based on how you were made and designed and what calls to your heart and your passions, not this little mold that has been created. That's not from God. That was created that's a man-made creation that's not from God. And so, just in embracing all of those people and value in that. I love that.
Yeah. And then another thing on that point is that I've really realized is that women in the military environment, they kind of feel like they can feel like threatened by each other because there's so few of us. Like I'm in a career field where like it's completely male dominated. I don't even know the percentage, but it is like super top heavy male, like 70-80%. And so what I've noticed is that women have a tendency to like put this wall up right away. And it takes forever to break that wall down.
Sure.
And so like the one thing about the military that is really nice is you move all the time. So you get a fresh start everywhere you go. And so one thing I've thought about in terms of, since we're getting ready to move again and we'll have the chance, is like, I need to do a better job of being vulnerable with the women around me and break that wall down immediately, because like all of these instances you go throughout the first few months or a year of where you're at. And you're like, I don't have any close relationships with females. And then you realize towards the end, when it's like almost time to leave, that you're like, oh, wait, I do. It's there. It just needs a little bit of massaging at the front end.
Sure.
So like, that's something I'm like, you need to be vulnerable with one another. And then, when you're not threatened by one another, then you have the chance to succeed and move forward. And you're not, but it just seems like it's a harder, tougher thing to break through. But
absolutely.
I think that's the best way we can support one another, is just by opening up right away.
Yeah. Because you've all worked so hard to get there, just with the challenges that you have already built into play. And I think too, but also vulnerability gives permission for vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And you find out right away if that person's ready to come along with you, then this is a relationship worth building. Mm-hmm. and fighting for and watering. If not, okay, that's okay. I tried and I was my authentic self. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Love you. Thanks for speaking to that, because I think that's a very unique experience that you are having. The importance of setting and coming back to your why/your values in everything you do. Because again, you're in a life where a lot's controlled, but so kind of where your values and your why fit within that might be kind of tricky sometimes. So how do you work through that?
Yeah. So this is something I feel like I'm kind of in the middle of, is deconstructing, like, where am I at? What do I want? What do I desire? I've been, kind of told what to do for so long. And that's the really nice thing is, they're like, you're going to go do this next and you're going to do this job. And I wouldn't even have to think about it.
Yeah.
But it has taken away the whole, like, well, what does Meghan want to do? What does Meghan desire? And so what I'm currently like kind of digging through is what do I want? What is my why? What do I value in this? And I feel like God has us here in the military for a reason. And I don't intend to get out anytime soon, but it's like, you still need to be able to find that, because you wake up every day and you go through the motions. And so I'm currently really deconstructing that. I'm not quite sure where that is yet, but I'm okay with that. I'm okay with being in that place, because I think I'm young and there's always room for growth and improvement, and you're never going to reach the finish line, which is something I've really had to accept, that you'll always keep growing. I'm such a list organized. I just want to check.
Me too. Me too. And I want to arrive.
Yes. I'm here. I'm good. I don't have to try anymore. But I've unfortunately come to the realization that's not how life works. So but the core has always been my faith. I think recently I've been thinking a lot about the church and the role of the church and in America and all around the world. And the things I always come back to is, the relationships that God has put in our life, that is always ringing true throughout my life. And then like nature, like you see him everywhere in his creation.
Yes.
And so I can hold super tightly to those things and know that shows that God is here. God is real. Yeah. The other stuff is being built in a weird fashion, which God is taking me on this journey. Oh, we're going to build this today, or we're going to build this. I'm like, what? How did I get here? This all started around the election. So I was like, what is the role of the church in this? But now I'm over here deconstructing this idea where I suddenly got on this emotional health path, and I'm like, oh my gosh. But I think that's just it's a good place to be. It's exciting because, there's more to come.
And curiosity. I think curiosity and being okay with continuing to evolve keeps things fresh and important too. And you're thinking about it. You're not just getting up every day and walking through life in a tunnel. And I think that's, really important too. And just that continual deconstructing, because it'll happen in different seasons of your life. This will continue to evolve. Your values and your whys will adjust accordingly. But I love you mentioned the nature piece. I ironically have this week, I'm doing these journals right now. And this journal, it was all about nature this week and recognizing what I love about nature. And I love nature. I love snow on trees and mountains. I'm total PNW girl like you. and beaches and ocean and sunsets and all those things, and really just like it was like, think about those things and then talk about how they make you feel and what kind of gratitude it brings up in you. And it was such a good mindful exercise of just reminding me when the world feels like, because I'm doing my own deconstruction in the church, especially the white evangelical church right now. I'm like, what the flip? What is happening here? And so it's really me. I'm really going back to square one and listening to lots of different people. I've been listening to Richard Rohr a lot lately. It made me think about when you were talking about the daily office hour monks earlier. You might really like him. He's really kind of taken me back to what was originally intended and those things. So I love you spoke that nature piece. I was like, yeah, me too. It always is a great reminder. And it's all around us, not around me in West Texas as much as it is around you in Hawaii. So enjoy that. Yes. I have to look for the sunset every night because I have no mountains or trees here, but it's a little hard to find. But it's such a great reminder of the creation that was created for us and bringing us grounded. And that's always there. And that's not changing. Living out of your own expectations versus others' expectations, which again might be tricky in the military when they're kind of always telling you what to do.
Yeah, they have full guides created for your career progression. They tell you exactly what roles you need to fulfill to get to where. And
wow.
And so the idea here is just answering that question of what do I want to do? What do I value in all of this? And this interests me, I'm going to run with it. And that comes with depending on who your leadership is and what they're supportive of and what they're encouraging you to do. But one thing I've just really found is just creating those boundaries and creating that space for what's important in your life helps with the expectations, because it forces you to have to either communicate intentionally towards others about what's important to you and what you value in that moment, or communicate to yourself about, I'm not going to do this because of A, B, and C.
Yeah.
And it really makes you think about the question of what are my expectations of others, and have I imposed those upon myself? And just these really unrealistic expectations.
Yeah.
Or have I imposed unrealistic expectations on other people as well?
Yeah.
And so that one I really kind of sorting through about what does this look like and how is this affecting my relationships? And, but I think the big question is, what's your why and what do you want to do? And then create that space. You have to carve that out of your life, and you have to carve that out of each and every day about what you want. And eventually you'll get there. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, the tricky thing, I had this great conversation with Tim and Sierra about this in their episode that they did. And Sierra talked about hopes versus expectations. And it was like a light bulb moment for me. I'm like, you can't call them expectations if you haven't communicated them to anybody. They're just hopes. I'm like, oh yeah. So I was like, that's it. Yeah. Accepting the layered aspects of ourselves. And what I mean by that is just all the stuff we've been through, the good, the bad, the ugly, all the stuff, and accepting those pieces and loving yourself from that, or learning how to. I'm still learning how to. I'm still learning how to accept those layers. But talk to me about that and that journey for you.
Mm-hmm. So one thing I like to keep in mind, the military is awesome because you get to meet new people and you get to meet different people from all walks of life, the most diverse group of people I've ever been a part of. And so I always remind myself, especially as a leader of many people, that everybody has a story to tell, and to just be willing to hear their story and what they have to say. So imposing that expectation upon others, I need to impose that upon myself, that I have a story that is worth telling, but I also have a story that is unique to what God has walked me through. And, in the past, I've walked through some really hard things, in my childhood and through my adolescence, and grief and anxiety. And I think the question I always asked was why would God ever have us go through something so terrible? Why would he ever bring us through this? And there's been a couple moments in my life where I've been able to kind of see that he has a plan with that. And one of those instances was going on a mission trip and getting to speak with young women who have experienced some similar tribulations and trials and abuse that I have, and getting to walk through that with them and explain my story. I just remember feeling like that was the first time I ever felt like God has my story in mind and he has a plan for this. And he's creating something so beautiful from something so horrible. And it was the first time many, many years later where I realized like, oh my goodness, like I'm, it's okay. And that was a really healing moment for me along that journey. But one thing that I love the song. It's called Tell Your Heart to Beat Again. And it's an older song that was often played on the radio, I think, like the Christian radio. But I love the message that it has, because it's like you have a story and, use that, but keep moving forward because God has a plan for you. And I've often, probably been more on the other end where dwelling on the past or dwelling on past things has hindered me from moving where I need to go. And so it's okay to accept those. Those are going to be part of your life and a part of your story, but it is time to move forward. And then he will use those things and he'll bring them back in front of you in the most unexpected ways. And I think that's just an incredible thing that he does. So
you never know where you're going to have a chance to have that impact. It just can be in the most unsuspecting places. And I think too, you touched on earlier, I love how you saw that come full circle, and just because that's hard. That's a hard road. That's a difficult road. I've traveled that road with my husband, and he's still trying to find where those places of impact are going to be. But he's also been able to share his story in vulnerability with others that needed to hear it, that it's hard. It sucks. I mean, there's nothing, and not sugarcoating that either, owning that as well. But when you have those places for impact where you can help somebody else, so powerful, so healing. And I think too, with you talked about the cultures. I mean, you're getting ready to go to South Korea. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
So just even with embracing the layers of yourself and other people, but also cultures. I think that is such an interesting journey that you get to travel down to. And just because it's different, and how does that culture and those differences affect the interactions and, and how we navigate people and their stories versus stereotypes and just things we don't understand out of ignorance in our own experience too.
That's a great question. And I think Hawaii has actually been a really good example of that, because there is a huge Native population, and I've been really fortunate enough to work really closely with them in what we do in the military. And so I worked with them on a day-to-day basis, and it's been like a really good reminder that, for the first time, like in my life, I grew up in like a predominantly white community, and I never really interacted that much with people of minorities. And so for the first time, you kind of feel a little out of place here. It's like a huge melting pot, and you're like, oh, whoa, I've never felt this way before. And I can understand why people say the things they do about minorities and what it feels like to be one. Not to say that my life is not nearly as difficult as what they're enduring, but with that being said, is like a greater appreciation for, again, the idea that everyone has a story, and just appreciating them for who they are and acknowledging their culture. And their culture is different than ours. And sometimes it doesn't, it feels just vastly different than what life is like on the mainland in terms of what they value and in terms of how they go about their day. But what I've noticed is they just want to see you interested in what their culture is, and they want to see you engaged and willing to learn about it. It's not to say that you have to fully engulf yourself in it or be a part of it, but it's just that interest and to say, wow, I'm curious about this and I want to know more, and I'm willing to try new things, or I'm willing to try new foods. Food is a huge part of their culture. And so I think that has really showed me a lot about the benefit of travel. And we've gotten a chance to do quite a bit of travel, which has been really good for just that piece itself, to learn about the different cultures and to be in an uncomfortable situation for sure. And needing to, you're like, I just need to get out of here. But at the same time, knowing that just stopping and pausing and appreciating what's around you.
Yeah, that window into what it might be like to be on the other side of things. And also, too, I think you brought up a good word, value. It's just that value, just their culture, their humanity is valuable too. We all are. I think that's so important. in summary, in living out feel, finding empowerment, embracing layers, how does all these things, I believe, affect the quality of our relationships? How do you feel like it affects the quality of your relationships?
So one thing that I've been thinking a lot about in terms of during this deconstruction process is needing to just slow down, because I think the best thing you could ever do for yourself is just that practice and that discipline of being present in the moment. And the rest of life kind of just takes care of itself in a lot of ways. And that's something I really want to kind of get a lot better at in my 20s and just for the rest of your life. Because I think we're just so much try to get to the next thing.
Yeah.
But in terms of that, like the other day, my counselor was asking me, what's the telltale sign that you're not doing this? Because I told him what my goal was about trying to do this. And I thought about it for a second and I said, it's when I stop listening to people. Like that is how I know during the day that I am not there. I'm not present. I am not appreciative of this conversation. And so that is a huge sign for me, like a warning flag that, hey, you're kind of off track with where you want to be and where you should be today. And so I think when you think about that aspect, it's like be present and appreciate all of the relationships that are in your life, the ones that you're not looking forward to talking to the person, the ones that you just want every second with the person. And listen to what they have to say and be there and be present for them, because I think it opens up the door for doing that. So I think slowing down is the best summary of just being defining empowerment, the embracing your layers, because it allows you just to see what's around you without moving on to the next thing.
Yeah, I love that. And our culture is so counter to that. I mean, we were taught to be multitasking powerhouses, and it gets in the way of being present in the moment and appreciating that person or that moment or that experience that's right in front of you. It takes and we get so focused on the next thing. Is stop where you are and just you're here for a reason. So take that in and embrace that. I love that. That's good advice. We are down to the rapid fire. Name 5 activities that nourish you.
Okay, so this was a lot easier to think of than the 5 character traits.
Not unexpected.
I had to delete a lot of them because it was over 5. But
that's a good problem.
I would say the outdoors, nature, like I was talking about. Reading is a big one for me. And solitude. I'm naturally an introvert. I'm an outgoing introvert. And so, but I still need my energy from just being alone. Simplicity is a newly discovered, but has always been there one for me, where I really like things simplified. I'm not a minimalist. I don't want to say that. My husband but I call myself a simplist, and I like that. I want things simplified. It does mean I have a little bit less stuff probably than a lot of people, and I want to have less stuff. But what it entails is just allowing more time for the slowing down, allowing more time for the better things in life. And I'm going to simplify my processes. I'm going to simplify how I organize things at work or at home, because I don't want to waste my time doing that. So that feels great when you get a chance to do that. Yeah. And the last thing would be sharing a good meal with loved ones, friends or family. I love going out to eat. That is one of my favorite activities.
So does your dad.
I know. I get
that's funny.
I know. But my husband is like, we have food at home. I'm like, oh, you sound like my mom.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. It's so funny. And I love the simplest thing, because I think we see her and Tim and all 3 of my girls really have talked a lot about that. I think that's something that's coming up more in your generation even, is recognizing, let's not waste our energy. We don't need all this stuff. We value experiences. We value relationships. We value moments. And I think that's a great path in getting there and making sure that that is your experience. And plus you're moving all the time. You don't need a bunch of stuff to pack.
Exactly. It makes it so much easier.
Oh my gosh. Speaking from someone who's moved 11 times. Keep it simple. Just more stuff you got to throw away later.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. 5 words on how you want to feel in the next 6 months.
The first is peaceful. The second is meekness, like Jesus, how he walked on the earth. And it's just like that humble confidence that you have in God.
Yeah. I love that combination. Humble confidence. I love that.
Yes. I'll hyphenate that and count that as one.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Adventurous, empowered, and courageous.
Awesome. Good stuff. And I think you got to be adventurous and courageous to do what you do. I don't think you can do what you do and not have that, just based on what I know. Well, thanks so much, Meghan. Oh my gosh. Thanks so much for getting up early and being with me, 5 hours apart. I appreciate this time. I love this wisdom. I love hearing from you now as a 25-year-old and just what you've learned and the experiences you're having. So much good stuff in this today. People, again, follow us on @Embracing Layers to see some snippets of what you'll get to know about with Meghan. Check out those sources, get to know what she knows. Do you do like a travel blog or anything for like what you're going to do?
No, I don't do it. I don't have any social media or anything. I got rid of it all.
Good for you. Actually, that's not a bad thing.
Yeah. So nothing there.
Okay. Well, I look forward to hearing about what you're doing through other avenues. But yeah, thanks so much for your time and your wisdom. And podcast audience, I hope you'll join us for this episode and just learn from it. And remember, stay in those moments, slow down, people, enjoy the beauty around us. If you don't take anything else today from that, Meghan's wisdom on that, thank you so much for sharing that. And everybody have a great week.